Hi, this is Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot. We had the good fortune a while back to interview Eller, who worked for 6 months with J. Allen Hynek and was good friends with him until his death in 1986. We haven't released the interview for quite some time due to a problem with syncing the sound to the picture because of what seemed to be an electromagnetic pulse that was sent to the camera during the interview. We are now releasing just the audio because we feel that the content is so fascinating that I think you'll agree it's worth salvaging. Because of her time with Hynek, she has a completely different take on what he might have thought about UFOs, as well as what might have occurred during the consultation he did with Steven Spielberg on Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He may have been the one to suggest the scene that you see at the end of the movie, in which you see Richard Dreyfuss and a group of scientists boarding an alien craft. This is reminiscent of the Serpo project. Serpo.org is the website in case you want to do more research about this. As much as Serpo may be a lot of disinfo, there is a grain of truth having to do with the secret space program, which is being investigated at this time by Richard C. Hoagland. I think you'll enjoy this interview, and we're really pleased to be able to present Eller to you at this time. This is Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot.
I got up and spoke at that first conference. Leo asked me to say a few words. So I told everyone that Dr. Hynek sent his best to all of them. And also went on to talk a little bit about the research. And I happened to say, we don't think you're crazy. The government is in cahoots with the aliens.
After that bombshell of a statement, we will get into the actual body of the interview. She made that statement during our interview as an outtake, and I just couldn't resist putting it up front here.
Could you tell a little bit about how we got in contact with each other? Because you actually found us, which is unusual.
I was, I don't know how I got to Project Camelot on the internet, but, you know, one link led to another, and I found your link and started reading about your project. And I thought, well, this is extremely worthy. I have felt most of my adult life that it was important to get this information out to the general public and to blow the whistle on the government and everything that they've kept under wraps for all these years. And so I signed up, giving my support to you. And in, I think, that initial contact, I said, oh, and by the way, I worked with Dr. Hynek for 6 months as his personal assistant when he moved out to Arizona. Mm-hmm. And then you got in touch with me. This was in 1985.
Okay.
I think I started around March of 1985, and my tenure there ended in October. I went back to the hospital in October. I was a nurse at the time and left nursing for 6 months to do this with Dr. Hynek because I thought it was an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. And
okay, well, you told us that it actually, before this ever happened, you had been having some dreams.
Yes, that's how I first contacted Dr. Hynek. My whole history started in 1960 when I read the article in the Reader's Digest about Betty and Barney Hill. And at the end of that article, the author said, well, fact or fiction, we'll leave it up to the reader to decide. And my reaction was one of being incensed. I thought, of course it's real. How I knew it was real, I had no idea, but I knew it was real. So I was interested in aliens, UFOs since 1960, but it was in probably 1976 I started having dreams, constant dreams, night after night after night for about 4 years of aliens, spacecraft, UFOs, other planets, other worlds, government involvement, helicopters, hidden bases, was all a part of my dreams, and it was just about ready to drive me crazy. Like I told you, a little bit like the guy in Close Encounters of the Third Kind with the mashed potatoes. But I started reading everything there was to read about UFOs, and in every book I picked up was Dr. Hynek's name, and I decided, well, this is the guy that knows, that has all the answers, so I'm going to write to him and ask him just what's up. And could he at least point me in a direction, introduce me to somebody in Arizona that I could talk to about these dreams? So I wrote to him and didn't hear a word from him for about 9 months. And then all of a sudden one night the phone rang, and I picked it up, and he said, I'd like to speak with Eller. And I said, speaking, and he said, this is Dr. Hynek. Well, he could have knocked me over with a feather at that point. But he said, I'm interested. He said, I just found your letter. It had dropped behind my desk, and I just found it. And that was very typical. To lose the letter and find it 9 months later, he had that quality of being sort of an absent-minded professor. And so he said, I'm very interested in your dreams. So we chatted about those for a while. And he wanted to know if I had kept a log of them. And I said, well, sort of. I could probably pull it together. And he said, because he had a colleague, and it was either Switzerland or Sweden, I think it was Switzerland, that was doing a research project on these dreams because they were worldwide. It was a worldwide phenomenon. So I typed up all the dreams and got them off to him with the help of a dear friend. And then I never heard anything more from him. And that was probably 6 years later. I opened up the Phoenix paper, and here are the headlines on the second page. Dr. J. Allen Hynek brings UFO research to Arizona. I couldn't believe it. And it was practically in my backyard. It was just down the street, up Indian School. So I decided I had to be involved. I was working at the hospital nights, but one morning when I got off work, I drove over there and met Tina and Brian, who were the couple that were instrumental in bringing Hynek to Arizona, along with a couple of other people. And they were living in this condo, and they were going to have the research project there in their condo, and they needed somebody to set up an office. So I said, well, I've got to be involved. Whether I feed the cat or take the trash out, I didn't care. I had to be involved. So I came, I would work nights, come mornings, and set up the office and set up a filing system and take calls. People were calling already. I mean, they hadn't hardly gotten settled, but people were calling, reporting sightings.
And this was during the time when Hynek was through, theoretically, through working for the Air Force and no longer working on Blue Book and all that, right?
Yes.
That was all behind him.
That was all behind him. He ended, that project ended in 1969. So at that time then, he left and went to Northwestern University, where he was professor of astronomy, and set up CUFOS in Chicago. That was his UFO research project in Chicago. Okay. So for those years, that's what he was doing as a civilian. And these people were able to convince him that he needed to come to the Southwest. And I suppose the winters in Chicago, they had a little bit to do with it too. But so they moved out, and it was probably 2 weeks after I had started at the center before I met him. And then I met him, and I told him who I was, that I was the person that had sent him the dreams. Of course, I imagine there were 1,000 people that had done that. But about a week later, he asked me if I would come be his assistant and set up his office, that all of his supplies, office supplies and furniture were coming soon. And he said, I can't pay you much. He said, I'll pay you $100 a week, and we'll try to get funding. And if we can get the funding in,